The town of Silverbrush had never seen a wedding this extravagant, white ribbons tied to every lamppost, brass horns echoing through the dusty streets, and half the townsfolk dressed in clothes they hadn't worn since statehood. Everyone knew this day was more than a marriage. It was politics polished into lace and silk. Governor Hart wanted his niece Eleanor tied to the wealthiest rancher in the territory, the rigid and humorless Jonathan Hawley. The union meant power, land, and influence. Love was the last thing anyone expected. But Eleanor Hart had expected love. She had waited for it, dreamed of it, painted it in her thoughts like a watercolor that never dried. And as she stood before the church mirror, her ivory gown cascading around her like a waterfall frozen in time, she felt the heavy truth settle in her bones. She was marrying a man she did not love for a future she did not want. Outside, the town cheered. Inside, Eleanor's heart suffocated. Her maid pinned the final pearl into her hair and whispered, "You look beautiful, Miss Ellie." Eleanor forced a soft smile. Beautiful? Yes, but beauty meant nothing when your soul felt caged. Her uncle had insisted this was her destiny. "You'll thank me, girl," he had boomed. "This marriage will keep you safe. It will make you somebody." But she already was somebody. She was a woman who wanted to choose her own path. She just wasn't allowed to. She pressed her palms against the window, watching the sun glint off the ceremonial flags, the shiny boots, the polished rifles of the men guarding the street. Every symbol around her reminded her of duty, not desire. And then she saw him, alone. Rider on a tall, raven-colored stallion moved between the crowd like an omen. His shoulders were broad, his posture commanding, his long black hair tied with a leather cord that swayed with every step of his mount. Even from a distance, Eleanor recognized him. Everyone did. Kachina Redhawk. The Apache Alpha, feared, respected. UNTMED. He dismounted before the church steps, his presence cutting through the music and chatter like a blade. The townsfolk quieted instantly. Mothers pulled children closer. Men touched their holsters out of instinct. No Apache dared ride into Silverbrush alone, no Apache except him. Rumors about Redhawk had been swirling for years. Some said he could throw a knife with such precision he could split a man's shadow. Others claimed he never bowed to any white man's rule. Some whispered that he rode under a spirit's blessing. But the most dangerous rumor was the one Eleanor had heard whispered in the trading post. He does not fear love, but he does not chase it either. Eleanor swallowed hard. Redhawk wasn't supposed to be here today. He rarely entered towns unless it was on his terms, never anyone else's. Yet here he was, at her wedding. Her heartbeat thundered. She didn't understand why she couldn't look away. Something in the way he climbed the church steps steady, unhurried, utterly self-possessed made the walls of her chest tighten. She felt seen, and she hated that she wanted that feeling more than she wanted security. Moments later, the double church doors opened and Redhawk stepped inside. The sudden silence swallowed the entire entry hall. Eleanor's maid gasped, dropping a bouquet of white roses. Redhawk approached the governor with the confident gait of a man who owed nothing to anyone. "I've come to return the horse your men stole from my people," Redhawk said evenly, his voice deep and steady as the canyon wind. He tossed the reins to the governor's feet as if the animal meant nothing. Governor Hart reddened but forced a polite nod, aware of the watching crowd. Eleanor's eyes drifted to Redhawk and froze when his gaze lifted to meet hers. Their eyes locked. The world fell away. The church, the music, the expectations, everything blurred until nothing remained except the fierce, unspoken connection between a bride dressed in white and the Apache Alpha who wasn't supposed to be there. For a full heartbeat, neither looked away. Eleanor felt something inside her shift, an irreversible click, like a door finally unlocking. In that moment, she understood two truths. She could not marry Jonathan Hawley, and the man standing across. The room the man every citizen feared was the only one she had ever wanted to run toward. The church bells began their hollow tolling, each clang reminding Eleanor of the ticking clock she could no longer outrun. Guests shuffled into their seats, lace parasols dipped, boots scraped against polished oak floors. The ceremony was minutes away. Her uncle's voice boomed from the front, ordering ushers to close the doors and signal the minister. But Eleanor wasn't listening to any of it. She was still staring at Kachina Redhawk. He stood near the church entrance, arms crossed over his broad chest, as still as a carved warrior statue. His dark eyes followed every movement she made, sharp, curious, unyielding. The townsfolk avoided him like he carried fire in his veins, but Eleanor felt none of their fear. If anything, she felt a pull so deep, so instinctive, she feared turning. Her back on him might hurt more than walking away from her own wedding. She clutched the sides of her dress, breath quickening. Her maid Claire nudged her gently. "Miss Ellie, you should be lined up. They're waiting. Waiting." The word felt like a chain tightening around her. She took one step toward the aisle, then stopped. Cold dread swept through her. She imagined Jonathan Hale's hand gripping hers, heavy and possessive. She imagined standing beside him for a lifetime, speaking vows she didn't believe, smiling lies in front of strangers, living on a ranch where every decision was made for her. Her knees trembled. No, she couldn't do it. Not now, not ever. Without another thought, Eleanor turned on her heel and slipped into the dimly lit hallway behind the choir loft. Claire gasped but didn't call after her, perhaps sensing the storm in Eleanor's heart. Eleanor pressed her back against the wall, the lace of her sleeve scratching her skin as she tried to steady her breaths. She needed space, a moment. Anything to drown out the suffocating certainty that this wedding was about to destroy her. Then footsteps, firm, measured, unmistakably confident, echoed down the hall. Eleanor's breath caught Redhawk. She knew it before he even appeared. He stepped into the narrow corridor with the grace of a mountain lion, his presence filling the space without him saying a word. The lamplight danced across his strong features, casting shadows that made him look both dangerous and devastatingly handsome. He didn't ask why she was there. He didn't need to. "You should be at the altar," he said quietly, though his voice held no judgment, only observation. Eleanor lifted her chin. "I can't." He studied her, eyes deep and unreadable. "Then leave. It isn't that simple." "It is," he said. "If you do not want the path chosen for you, walk another." His words struck her like arrows, honest, raw, liberating. "No one has ever told me I could," she whispered. Redhawk stepped closer, the heat from his body warming her chilled skin. "I am telling you now." Her heart pounded violently. This man, this Apache warrior the whole town feared. He understood her without her speaking a full sentence. He saw her not the bride, not the governor's niece, not a bargaining chip, but the woman beneath all that. "Why did you come today?" she asked, voice barely audible. His gaze did not waver. Someone pulled me here." Her breath hitched. She knew he meant her. She felt it in the way he looked at her, like she was the only thing in the room worth seeing. "I don't want to marry him," she confessed, the words spilling out like water breaching a dam. "I never wanted this." Redhawk's jaw tightened. "Then don't offer them your life." Eleanor swallowed, stepping closer until her gown brushed his boots. Her pulse roared in her ears. "What do I do?" she asked, trembling. Redhawk lowered his head slightly, his voice dipping into something rough and intimate. "Run." Eleanor's breath shook, and in a sudden moment of reckless courage, she rose on her toes, leaned close to his ear, and whispered, "Find me at the waterfalls, and I'll be yours all night long." The hallway fell silent, stunned, electric, forbidden. Redhawk's eyes widened a fraction. No woman had ever spoken to him that way, certainly no bride. Certainly no governor's kin. Her boldness struck him like wildfire. Eleanor backed away slowly, heart pounding so hard she feared it might break through the seams of her corset. Red Hawk stepped toward her one step, two, his expression darkening into something fierce and hungry. "Eleanor," he murmured, her name curling through the air like a promise, "if I come to those falls, you will not return the same woman you were this morning." "I know," she whispered, and she did, because she had already chosen him. Eleanor didn't walk out of the church, she fled, her skirts gathered in her fists, her heartbeat rattling against her ribs like a terrified bird. She burst through the back door and into the open air behind the chapel. Cold wind struck her face, biting through her lace veil, but she felt nothing except the breathless rush of adrenaline. She had done it. She had actually whispered those words to Kachina Redhawk, "Find me at the waterfalls, and I'll be yours all night long." She didn't know what kind of woman said something so scandalous, so wild, so dangerously irreversible. But the echo of her whisper still clung to her lips, warming her in ways the sun could not. She ran toward the small stable where her mare Lacey waited. The stable boy looked at her in utter shock. "Miss Eleanor? You're supposed to be getting wed." "Not today," she said breathlessly. "Saddle her now, please." The boy had never seen that look in her eyes before. Determined, desperate, radiant with a fire that had long been trapped beneath politeness and duty. He hesitated only a heartbeat before obeying. Within moments, Lacey was saddled. Eleanor gathered her dress, mounted clumsily but quickly, and nudged the mare forward. As she rode out the back of the property, she heard the church organ begin the opening hymn. Voices rose inside, awaiting the bride who would never walk the aisle. Eleanor did not look back. Inside the church, the groom checked his pocket watch, irritation written deep across his square jaw. Jonathan Hawley whispered harshly to the governor, "Where is she? This is humiliating." Governor Hart's face turned the shade of a storm cloud. "She's just nervous. She's a timid girl, you know that." But Jonathan wasn't convinced. His eyes flickered sharply toward the back hallway. When he caught sight of Red Hawk standing there, leaning casually against the wall like a predator waiting for something to happen, his blood drained. What is he doing here? Before the governor could answer, Red Hawk pushed off the wall and walked out the door Eleanor had vanished through. Jonathan's breath hitched. "Oh no. No, he thrust forward. "She's run off. I know she has." The governor's face went pale. Jonathan didn't wait for permission. He barked at his men, "Get the horses. Find her, now." And within minutes, a posse was forming. Eleanor was already far beyond town, Lacey's hooves drumming against the earth like thunder. Her wedding veil tore loose, flying behind her like a pale ghost before being carried off by the wind. She didn't stop. She didn't dare. The forest opened before her, vast and wild and full of shadows. Sunlight flickered between pine boughs. Birds scattered at her passing. Her heartbeat steadied, sinking with the mare's gallop. For the first time in her life, she felt free, free of the expectations, free of the suffocating engagement, free of the life decided for her and waiting at the end. Of this freedom was a man she barely knew, but somehow trusted with her soul. The waterfalls. They weren't far now. She had gone there many times as a child, sneaking away from lessons and responsibilities. The falls were her sanctuary, her secret, the one place no one, including her uncle, ever bothered to follow. She prayed Red Hawk would find the trail she left behind, but she didn't know he was already following Kachina. Red Hawk rode his stallion in silence, tracking her like a wolf tracks breath on the wind. She rode fearlessly, recklessly, leaving scraps of lace, broken branches, and hoof marks for him to read as easily as words on a page. He admired her spirit. But he also feared for her safety. This was Apache land, his land, and though he ruled the shadows of the canyon, there were still dangers no bride in silk was prepared for. Wild animals, treacherous cliffs, men who would kill her for running. He quickened his pace. He had not expected to be pulled to her like this, drawn as if her very heartbeat had become a beacon inside him. He had seen many white women in his life. None had looked at him the way she did in that hallway, like he was salvation instead of danger. As he reached the forest, he murmured to his horse, "She rides like a storm. We must catch her before the others do." He did not need to look back to know Jonathan Hale's men were riding hard, closing in with rifles, anger, and humiliation fueling their chase. But Red Hawk had no intention of letting them reach her first. Eleanor burst through the final thicket and heard it, the thundering roar of the waterfalls. Mist filled the air, cool and silver, kissing her skin as she dismounted. She lifted her torn skirts, stepping over mossy stones as white foam churned below. She had reached their meeting place. Now all that remained was the question that made her heart quiver. Would he come? She pressed her hand to her racing heart. And then behind her, a single, deliberate hoof step echoed. She turned. Kachina Red Hawk emerged from the trees like a shadow made flesh, powerful, dark-eyed, and breathtaking. He had come. The roar of the waterfalls was deafening, drowning out the world and its rules. Mist rose in silver plumes, wrapping Eleanor in a cool, wet embrace that made her heart pound even faster. Her ivory gown, now damp and torn, clung to her like a second skin, the layers of lace and silk swirling around her legs as she stepped closer to the edge of the churning pool. Her bare feet slipped on the slick stones, but she didn't care. She had risked everything to get here, and nothing could stop her now. She glanced behind her, half expecting Jonathan Hollow or his posse to burst from the trees, guns raised, shouting her name. But the forest was quiet except for the pounding water. The night was theirs. A shadow moved through the mist, smooth and powerful. Kachina Red Hawk emerged from the tree line, horse trailing behind him, eyes dark and unreadable. His presence was magnetic, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. Every step he took toward her made Eleanor's knees weak. Her pulse raced. Her breath caught in her throat. This was not just a meeting, this was a collision of fate, and she could feel it in every fiber of her being. "Eleanor," he said, voice low, rough as the rocks beneath their feet. The name rolled off his tongue with weight and reverence. "You should not be here alone." "I am not afraid," she said, though her voice quivered. "Not tonight." Red Hawk's gaze softened, but only slightly. He dismounted, moving closer with silent, predatory grace. The mist swirled around them, making him seem larger, more untouchable than ever. His eyes never left hers, and Eleanor felt the heat of his stare burn into her, igniting a fire she had never known. "You could have been captured, killed," he said. "Yet you ran. Brave or foolish?" "Brave," she whispered. "Because I chose this. Because I chose you." The words hung in the mist between them. Red Hawk's lips twitched into the faintest shadow of a smile, one that was both amused and approving. He stopped just a breath away from her, close enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from his body. Every muscle beneath the dark fabric of his shirt was defined and taut, and Eleanor's breath hitched at the nearness. He was danger incarnate, yet impossibly compelling. Her hands trembled as she reached out, brushing the wet hair from her face. The water's roar filled the space around them, but somehow it felt intimate, as though the world had shrunk to nothing but the two of them. Standing on the edge of stone and foam, Red Hawk's hand rose slowly, hesitating for only a moment before cupping her cheek. His touch was firm yet gentle, sending a jolt through her body that left her knees weak. "You dare tempt me like this," he murmured, voice thick with emotion she could not name. I dare, Eleanor whispered back, leaning into him, daring herself as much as him. I promised you. All night long. Red Hawk's gaze darkened, his jaw tightening. Desire and restraint warred within him. Every rule he had lived by, every battle he had fought, every fear of losing her. None mattered now. He stepped closer until their foreheads touched, their breaths mingling with the mist of the waterfalls, hearts beating in a violent rhythm that mirrored the surging water. And then their lips met. It was not a timid kiss. It was urgent, fiery, a collision of longing and release. Eleanor felt every ounce of the tension she had carried of the forced wedding, the suffocating expectations, the years of hidden desire melt into that single consuming moment. Red Hawk's hands gripped her waist, anchoring her to him as the world fell away. She clutched at his shoulders, her body trembling with an exhilaration she had never known, every nerve alive, every thought focused on the man before her. They pulled back slightly, gasping, their foreheads still pressed together. The water crashed behind them, a perfect orchestra for their reckless, forbidden union. You are mine tonight, he growled, low and possessive, yet reverent. And you are mine, Eleanor replied, her voice barely audible over the roar. All night and beyond. Red Hawk's eyes flickered toward the darkness surrounding them, alert and cautious. Dawn will come, he said, and with it, the world will try to take you back. I don't care, she whispered fiercely. I don't care about the world. Only you. A silent understanding passed between them, deeper than words could carry. The night belonged to them, stolen from fate and law and expectation. The waterfalls thundered like their hearts, wild and untamed, and in that wild liquid symphony, Eleanor felt a freedom she had never known. For the first time, she was not a bride of convenience, not a pawn, not a girl living under the weight of someone else's plans. She was simply Eleanor Hart, and she was utterly, completely, irrevocably alive. The mist from the waterfalls clung to their bodies, cooling their heated skin but failing to dampen the wildfire burning between them. Eleanor's hair was wet and tangled, her dress soaked and torn, but she hardly noticed. Every touch, every brush of Red Hawk's hands against her arms, ignited a heat that no river, no mist, and no fear could quell. The world beyond the waterfalls did not exist. There were no duties, no laws, no uncle, no groom, only them. And the night stretched out before them like a stolen eternity. Red Hawk's fingers traced the line of her jaw, tilting her head gently so their eyes met. You've risked everything, he murmured, his voice rough with barely contained emotion. Do you understand what you've done? I do, Eleanor whispered back, her voice trembling not from fear, but from the exhilaration of choosing for herself for the first time in her life. And I'd risk it all again if it meant being with you. His eyes darkened, shadowed with desire and something more, something primal, protective, and fierce. He leaned close, their foreheads touching, and Eleanor felt the steady beat of his pulse, strong and unyielding. She reached up, cupping the back of his neck, and he responded with a low growl that vibrated through her chest. It was a sound of possession, warning and need all rolled into one. I am yours tonight, she said, her lips brushing against his in a soft, daring promise. All night long. Red Hawk's hands roamed her back, pulling her flush against him. Their kisses grew urgent, wild, and all-consuming. Every sensation she had denied herself, every glance, every longing she had hidden behind polite smiles came rushing back, raw and unrelenting. Eleanor's heart pounded in tandem with the waterfall's roar. Each beat a declaration of the freedom she had claimed. They broke apart just enough to breathe. Foreheads still pressed together, eyes locked in a gaze that spoke louder than any words. You will not leave me, Red Hawk murmured, almost as a prayer, almost as a command. Never, Eleanor promised. Her voice was steady now, fearless. Not ever. The night deepened around them, the darkness a cloak shielding them from the world. Red Hawk guided her down to the rocks closer to the pool, their steps cautious but intimate, bodies pressed together. The foam from the waterfalls licked at their feet, cold and insistent. Yet Eleanor shivered in pleasure rather than discomfort. They paused at the water's edge, where the roar was deafening, yet somehow intimate. Red Hawk cupped her face in both hands, and Eleanor melted into his touch, trusting him utterly. Every previous life, the polite daughter, the obedient niece, the intended bride, was gone. She was fully, completely Eleanor, alive in the most dangerous and beautiful way. He leaned down, whispering against her lips, "Tonight I vow to protect you. No man, no law, no gun will take you from me." "I don't need protection," she countered, smiling against his lips, "not if I have you by my side." And with that, Red Hawk captured her in another searing kiss, the kind that stole her breath and left her trembling, and the kind that made promises without words. It was a kiss that marked her, claimed her, bound them together in ways neither of them fully understood, yet knew they could not undo. But as dawn crept imperceptibly closer, shadows began to stir among the trees. The distant clatter of hooves echoed faintly, growing louder with each passing heartbeat. Eleanor stiffened, heart sinking. Jonathan Hale's men, her uncle's guards, the law, courtesy, and decorum, all the things she had abandoned, were coming for her. Red Hawk's eyes flickered toward the sounds in the forest, sharp and commanding. "They are coming," he said, his voice low but filled with urgency. "We must move." Eleanor didn't protest. She clung to him, breathless and flushed, feeling an ache she had never known, a fear that their stolen night, this taste of freedom and desire, could be ripped away at any moment. Yet the intensity of their connection made her fearless in other ways. She had chosen him. She had defied the world. And nothing, not even an armed posse, could erase the bond they had forged in the waterfall's wild embrace. Red Hawk lifted her into his arms, carrying her up the slippery stones with ease, his strength a stark reminder of the man she had surrendered her heart to. Water splashed around them, foaming and hissing. Yet they moved like shadows, silent and unstoppable. Eleanor clung to him, her head resting against his chest, feeling the rise and fall of his powerful body, knowing that whatever came next, the night had changed everything. Tonight she was his, and he would not let anyone take her back. The first hint of dawn was pale and cold, brushing the edges of the canyon like a ghost. The waterfalls roared relentlessly, masking the distant clatter of hooves, but Eleanor felt it in her bones. Danger was close. Too close. Her body pressed against Red Hawk's as he carried her up the slick rocks, and every beat of his heart beneath her ear was a stark reminder that the world beyond their stolen night would not forgive them easily. Behind the trees, the sound of pursuit grew louder. Jonathan Hale's posse was relentless, spurred by humiliation, rage, and greed. They had already lost face in the church when Eleanor vanished. Now, each step of their horses into the canyon was calculated, desperate to reclaim what they believed belonged to them. Guns were loaded, hands were steady, and pride burned hotter than the early sun. Red Hawk paused briefly on a high ridge, surveying the twisting canyon below. His eyes, dark and unyielding, scanned the landscape for signs of ambush. The Apache Alpha had known danger all his life, but protecting Eleanor introduced an entirely new kind of peril. He did not fear death for himself. He feared it for her. "They are following," he said quietly, voice rough. "They will not stop until they find you." Eleanor's grip on him tightened. "We can't outrun them," she whispered. "There are too many." Red Hawk's lips brushed the top of her hair, a brief gesture of reassurance. Then we will outsmart them, he murmured. And we will survive. Trust me. Eleanor swallowed hard, trusting him because she had no other choice and because she knew, deep in her heart, that she had never trusted anyone like this before. The Law Society, even her own family, had never offered her protection or understanding. But Red Hawk had chosen her. And now he was willing to fight anything and everything for her. The canyon twisted and turned, narrow paths bordered by sheer cliffs and dense brush. Red Hawk led them through hidden trails known only to him, moving with the silence and precision of a hunter. Every step was deliberate. Every rock and route they passed was a potential hazard, yet Eleanor followed without hesitation, trusting him with her life and heart alike. The posse pressed on, relentless. They stumbled across broken branches, torn pieces of fabric, and a floating bouquet that had been lost in the waterfall's surge. Each clue marked the trail Eleanor had left behind, and each brought the hunters closer. One of them, a hulking man with a scar across his cheek, pointed. She went this way. Don't let her escape. But Red Hawk was already several steps ahead. Using the canyon's secret bends and blind curves, he maneuvered Eleanor through shadows and over rocks that would have broken the neck of any ordinary horse. His stallion seemed to sense the urgency, moving with unnatural speed yet careful precision. Avoiding the cliffs and pitfalls that could spell disaster, Eleanor's breath came in shallow. Rapid bursts, partly from exertion, partly from fear, and partly from the adrenaline that surged when Red Hawk's hand brushed hers to steady her. When his gaze caught hers and silently assured her, "I will not let anyone touch you." Hours, or was it minutes? Passed in a tense blur. The canyon's twists became a labyrinth, the sounds of pursuit echoing off the stone walls, growing closer and then fading as Red Hawk led them through hidden side trails and steep ridges. Eleanor could feel the weight of the guns in the distant posse, the rhythm of hooves pounding in relentless pursuit. Her heart pounded not just from fear, but from the raw, terrifying thrill of being alive, truly alive, in the arms of the man she had chosen over everything else. Finally, they reached a sheltered nook behind a jutting cliff, hidden by thick foliage and the canyon's natural curve. Red Hawk dismounted quickly, lowering Eleanor to the ground. She shivered, exhausted and wet, but he pulled her into his chest, shielding her from both wind and potential eyes. "They will not find us here," he said softly, brushing wet hair from her face. His dark eyes held hers with a possessive intensity that made Eleanor's breath hitch. "Rest for now. Then we move again." Eleanor nodded, letting herself collapse against him. The adrenaline still coursed through her veins, but the storm of fear had calmed, replaced by the warmth and protection radiating from the man she had dared to claim as her own. She whispered, almost in awe, "You saved me." Red Hawk's hands tightened around her, firm and protective. "No," he said, voice low, dangerous. "You saved yourself. I only make sure no one takes what you choose to hold." And in that moment, Eleanor knew the truth. No matter the posse, no matter the law, no matter the wrath of her family or society, they had already won something far more precious. They had each other. The canyon held its breath with them, the waterfalls roaring nearby, as the night's stolen intimacy transformed into a fight for freedom that would define everything to come. The canyon held a fragile silence, broken only by the roar of the waterfalls and the distant, relentless pounding of hooves. Eleanor clung to Red Hawk, her heart hammering not just from fear, but from the intoxicating surge of adrenaline that came with standing on the edge of life and death. She had never felt so alive or so defiant. From their hiding spot, the posse had discovered the trail. The flash of metal glinted briefly through the trees, rifles leveled, guns cocked. Eleanor's stomach dropped, and she instinctively stepped forward, placing herself between Red Hawk and the advancing men. "No," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "You will not touch him. You will not touch me." One of the men, a broad, scarred ranch hand, sneered. "Step aside, girl. You belong with Jonathan Hawley. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Eleanor's eyes flashed with fury. "I do not belong to anyone but myself. And I belong to him," she shouted, pointing at Red Hawk. Her voice carried through the canyon like a cannon. "Shoot me first if you dare, because I will not go back. Not to him, not to anyone." Red Hawk's jaw tightened, his dark eyes blazing. He did not move forward, not yet, but the air around him seemed to hum with danger. The men realized, almost too late, that they were confronting not just a determined bride, but a warrior at her side who had no intention of surrendering. The scarred man laughed nervously, sensing the tension he could not measure. "You're just a girl. Step aside, or I am more than you will ever understand." Eleanor cut him off, her voice unwavering despite the shaking of her knees. "And he is the only man I will ever follow." She lifted her chin, defiance sparking in her eyes like wildfire. "If you fire your guns, it won't be me you take, it will be your own shame." Red Hawk moved then, slow, deliberate, but impossibly fast. He stepped in front of her, body tense, muscles coiled like a spring. His eyes locked onto the posse, dangerous and unyielding. "You will leave now," he said, voice low and lethal. "And you will not return. Do you understand me?" The men faltered. They had heard stories of Kachina Red Hawk, how he could disappear into the shadows, how he could kill without mercy. But standing before them now, beside the defiant bride, he was more than legend. He was alive, cowering, untouchable. And Eleanor, though human and fragile in many ways, radiated a courage that was contagious, a fire that no amount of gunpowder could extinguish. The scarred man tightened his jaw. "We'll see about that," he muttered, but doubt had already seeped into the others' minds. They glanced at each other, unease creeping into their bravado. Eleanor, chest heaving, met their eyes without flinching. She was no longer the timid niece of a governor. She was a woman who had chosen her destiny, and she radiated a fearlessness that no rifle could erase. Finally, after a tense, drawn-out silence, the leader of the posse raised a hand. "Back," he ordered, reluctantly. "We'll return with more men." Red Hawk's eyes never left them until the last of the posse disappeared into the trees. Only then did he allow himself to exhale, the rigid tension in his shoulders loosening slightly. He turned to Eleanor, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face, his touch both protective and intimate. "You are fearless," he murmured, voice low and reverent. "And reckless. And I love it." Eleanor smiled, the first genuine smile in hours or perhaps in years. "I had to be. I had no other choice." Red Hawk stepped closer, pulling her into his arms. She felt the solid weight of his chest against her, the strength of his arms around her, the pulse of his heart mingling with her own. For the first time, she understood what it meant to be truly seen and truly protected. "You risked everything for me," he said, his lips brushing the side of her face. "And I swear, no one will ever take you from me." Eleanor's lips curved into a mischievous, daring smile. "I'll hold you to that, Kachina Red Hawk." He laughed softly, the sound low and dangerous, full of promise. "You will," he said. "I will never let anyone take what I claim." The sun began to peek over the canyon walls, bathing the waterfalls in a golden glow. Mist swirled around them, water sparkling like liquid diamonds in the early light. Eleanor shivered not from cold, but from the sheer, thrilling intensity of what they had endured together. Tonight they had defied everything: law, family, society. And yet, more than just surviving, they had claimed something that no posse, no lawman, and no threat could ever touch. They had claimed each other, as they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms. Eleanor whispered, "The world can try to take us, but we'll always find a way back to each other." Red Hawk's eyes softened, shadowed by the night's dangers, yet fierce with promise. "Always," he agreed, pressing a possessive kiss to her forehead. The canyon held its breath with them, the waterfalls roaring as the two of them prepared for the life they had chosen, a life together, wild, untamed, and unbreakable. The sun rose slowly over the canyon, spilling golden light across the waterfalls and painting the mist in a haze of fire and silver. Eleanor's hair clung to her damp cheeks, her torn wedding gown drying in uneven patches, but she barely noticed. She was alive, free, and in Red Hawk's arms. She felt more herself than she ever had in her entire life. The previous night's adrenaline still hummed through her veins. The stolen kisses, the daring escape, and the tense standoff lingering like a vivid dream she never wanted to end. Her heart beat in time with the roar of the falls, and in that rhythm, she felt something she had never truly felt before, safety in the presence of someone who would fight for her. No matter the cost, Red Hawk carried her to a small, hidden alcove, shielded by jagged rocks and thick undergrowth, a secret only he knew. There, they could finally breathe without the constant fear of pursuit. The distant sounds of hooves had faded into the canyon's endless echoes. They were alone. For the first time, completely alone. Eleanor's gaze met his dark eyes and fierce heart. "Where do we go from here?" she asked, voice quiet but steady. She had left her old life behind, but the weight of uncertainty pressed on her. She wanted him, yes, but she also wanted certainty. A place in the world where they could exist together, without the shadow of the law or angry relatives looming over them. Red Hawk's jaw tightened as he studied her face. "We go where we choose," he said. "Where no one can force you to obey anyone but me. Where you can be free, Eleanor." He brushed a damp strand of hair from her forehead, his touch reverent, protective. "We start over together." She reached up and placed her hand over his, feeling the raw strength in his fingers, the warmth and reassurance. "Together," she echoed, "and nothing will ever take us apart." The roar of the waterfalls filled the silence, punctuating the moment like a celebration of their defiance. Eleanor laughed softly, a sound that had been trapped for too long, the tension of a life dictated by others spilling out in pure relief and joy. Red Hawk smiled, a rare, genuine curve of lips that made her heart skip. He took her hand, guiding her through the hidden paths he knew so well. Every step was careful, yet urgent, the canyon twisting and bending as if it were protecting their escape. The early sun glinted off the water, illuminating the rocks and mist, turning their flight into something magical, almost unreal. They rode in silence for a time, the world awakening around them. Birds called from the treetops, and the distant shimmer of the river promised life beyond the shadows of the canyon. Eleanor leaned against Red Hawk, her trust in him complete. He was more than a protector. He was the man who had claimed her heart, and now he claimed her life as fiercely as he did her body. Finally, they reached a secluded plateau, hidden from the canyon's main trails. Red Hawk dismounted, helping Eleanor down with care. She adjusted the folds of her soaked dress, still wet and torn, yet somehow more beautiful than ever in the raw light of morning. She looked at him, eyes bright with determination and love. "We can be anywhere," she whispered. "But I choose here, with you." Red Hawk's hands framed her face, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. "And I choose you, Eleanor, in every place, in every life. You are mine, and I am yours, always." Eleanor's lips curved into a smile, and she pressed forward, capturing his mouth in a soft, fierce kiss, sealing a promise stronger than law or society. The kiss lingered, long and intimate, a binding of hearts and souls that left them both breathless in that moment. The canyon, The waterfalls, the sun, and the mist all seemed to celebrate their union. The past, the church, the forced wedding, the angry posse vanished like morning fog. Only the two of them existed, bound by desire, choice, and unbreakable. Eleanor removed her wedding veil, folding it carefully and placing it in Red Hawk's hand. "That life is over," she said softly, "and this one begins now." Red Hawk's gaze softened, dark eyes full of promise and reverence. "And we will make it ours," he said. "Every day, every night, for the rest of our lives." The waterfalls roared behind them, white water crashing over stone as if heralding the beginning of something unstoppable. Eleanor rested her head against his chest, listening to the beat of his heart, feeling the power and warmth of the man she had chosen. Together, they would face whatever the world threw at them. But for now, they simply existed free, untamed, and completely, irrevocably in love. A new dawn had broken not just in the sky, but in their lives. And beneath the rising sun, Eleanor Hart, the runaway bride, had finally found the only man she had ever wanted, her Apache alpha, her partner, her love, her life.